My name is Emily, 33 years old, head nurse at a general hospital in Oregon. Though my job requires focus, resilience, and sometimes sacrifice, in my family's eyes, especially my sister Samantha's, I was never good enough to be respected. The annual Mitchell family gathering took place on a Saturday afternoon, inside a nearly 5,000 square foot estate in West Lynn, where my parents lived with Samantha and her husband, Rick. The driveway was lined with gleaming SUVs, and a bright silver Mercedes GLC parked closest to the front door. I had to park down the street, next to the trash bins. "Emily, you made it!" my mom said as she came out to greet me, her long silk dress whispering across the stone tiles. Her smile was half warm, half worried, like she feared I might disrupt the picture-perfect setting Samantha had so carefully curated. "Traffic was awful, Mom," I said, adjusting my blue wool dress and smoothing a few stray hairs. "Sorry I'm late." "Our sweet little sister has arrived." Samantha's sharp voice rang from the second-floor balcony. She descended in a form-fitting Zimmermann dress, red wine in hand. "Of course, buses don't exactly fly on weekends, right?" I gave a small smile, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I drove, Sam. It's just that the employee lot at the hospital's not that convenient." "Still doing the nursing thing?" Samantha gave me a once-over like she was evaluating a clearance item. "Rick and I just closed on our third vacation home in Colorado. You really should think about your future, Emily. A job like yours, exhausting and barely pays." Rick chuckled, that kind of empty laugh meant to reinforce an old, tired joke. I glanced around the room. Relatives in tight clusters, full glasses in hand, chattering away. I felt like an ink stain on a white tablecloth. My father appeared, holding a glass of whiskey. "Samantha, why don't you tell everyone about that new coastal project?" "Oh yes." Samantha lifted her glass. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" The room hushed. Instantly. I reached for a glass of juice from a passing tray, already sensing something was off. "Rick and I are eyeing a stunning estate in Carmel by the Sea," she announced, her eyes flicking toward me. 6 bedrooms, infinity pool, ocean view, absolute paradise. But of course, not everyone is in the position to pursue that kind of investment. I could see it coming. My grip on the glass tightened. "Emily," Samantha continued, her tone silky but laced with venom. "I heard you were having a little financial trouble? I saw a few collection letters in your mailbox when I stopped by last week." "Nothing to be ashamed of. We all struggle sometimes." The air froze. One uncle coughed awkwardly. A cousin avoided my eyes. My mom pressed her lips together. My dad looked toward the ceiling, searching for an escape. "I never said I was having trouble," I replied calmly. "And those were loan ads, not collections." "Oh, don't be embarrassed. Everyone in this family cares about you." "I just think maybe it's time to be realistic. Ever consider trying something less intense?" I smiled, but my insides were burning. Samantha had always known how to turn concern into a weapon, and today she fired it straight at my chest. I thought I was used to it. Turns out, it never gets easier. Rick raised his glass. "To each their own. Some go into healthcare, some go into real estate. As long as it works out." "Exactly," I said, eyes locked on Samantha. "Some people make money flaunting it. Some just quietly work. And sometimes..." Silence is the sharpest response. Samantha narrowed her eyes. I turned and walked out to the backyard, heart pounding. A message popped up on my phone. "Everything's finalized. Transfer papers just signed." I gripped my phone tighter. The estate in Carmel by the Sea had just legally become mine. And she didn't know it yet. I left the party earlier than planned, leaving behind the crystal chandeliers and fake laughter of people who had always assumed I was the family's failure. My phone screen was still lit with a message from Mr. Mason, my personal attorney and real estate advisor. whom I had quietly worked with for the past 2 years. "Congratulations, Emily. The house is now in your name. No one has been notified, just as you requested." The beachfront estate in Carmel that Samantha had been flaunting everywhere as her lifelong dream was, in truth, an investment opportunity I'd been preparing for silently. 4 years ago, after a 19-hour shift, I overheard my sister sneer in front of our relatives that I was nothing more than a glorified bedpan cleaner. I didn't argue. I went home, opened my laptop, and started learning about investing. I didn't have a flashy financial advisor or a mentor to guide me. I learned through YouTube, secondhand books from flea markets, and chance conversations with patients who were retired advisors, accountants, even attorneys. I enrolled in online courses at night and picked up extra weekend shifts. No one questioned why I lived so frugally. It bordered on extreme. Samantha, of course, loved offering an explanation. "Emily's just scared of being poor." She had no idea that every overtime paycheck, every hospital bonus, even tax refunds, I funneled all of it into my investment portfolio. I started with healthcare stocks, moved into real estate investment trusts, and then shifted to small rental properties on the outskirts of Salem. By the time I bought my second apartment, Samantha was still posting $80.00 lunches from Napa Valley on Instagram. About a year ago, I noticed she kept bringing up Carmel. From her stories touring open houses, to photos of her clutching wine glasses with blue ocean backdrops, I started piecing the clues together. There was one estate she visited 3 times, each from the same angle, always captioned with, "Someday." I sent that photo to Mr. Mason. A week later, he sent back the documents. "The owners are willing to negotiate if we move quickly. They want to leave the market and retire in Florida." I didn't hesitate. I paid using funds from 3 properties I'd sold just a month earlier, plus returns from my stock investments. Ironically, while I was quietly closing the deal, Samantha kept bragging about a major deal about to close. She told everyone the house was being held for her. Nobody else had a shot. I don't know if that was true or just another of her usual exaggerations. But one thing I did know, she had never placed a deposit, nor signed a single document. Just words. As always, I asked for the entire transaction to be kept private. No public listings, no buyer name updates, nothing flagged on the major real estate sites. I wanted the surprise to land at the perfect moment, and nothing felt more fitting than the announcement dinner Samantha was planning for the end of the month. She'd even texted the family group. "Big surprise coming." While she was busy choosing menus and booking a table for over a dozen people at a French bistro, I was scheduling appointments with an architect. The house, while beautiful, needed a few things addressed before I could move to the next phase. That afternoon, I stood in the great room, beneath soaring ceilings, facing the full-length windows that opened to the endless shoreline. The sound of waves breaking on stone, the scent of pine, and the golden hour sun quietly filling the space, felt like a reward earned from 7 years of silent effort. I didn't buy this house for revenge. I bought it because I could. But if it just so happens to shatter someone's dream, maybe that's fair too. No one knows I own this place yet. Saturday night, my parents' estate lit up like an upscale soiree. String lights hung along the white wooden fence, and a buffet table stretched out with an Italian menu catered from a fine dining spot in Lake Oswego. In the garden corner, a small jazz band played "Autumn Leaves" so softly, it felt like we were living in a Nancy Meyers film. I arrived on time, parked my old sedan 3 blocks away, and walked in. My simple black dress made me practically disappear into the sea of Gucci, Hermes, and Versace. I didn't need to stand out. I just needed the right moment. "Emily, you're here, Rick." Samantha's husband gave me a tight smile. "Sam's in the kitchen, planning the main event." "Main event?" I smirked. She clearly couldn't wait another second to show off. I slipped through the crowd and spotted my cousin Jeremy by the dessert table. He gave me a small shake of the head and whispered, "Ready?" "I was born for this moment," I said, keeping my voice steady. My parents sat beneath the back patio. My mom wore her usual worried expression, and my dad was glued to his phone. When they saw me, my mom squeezed my hand. "Honey, I'm glad you came. Just help keep things pleasant, okay?" I nodded without saying a word. Samantha made her entrance like a Broadway lead, in an off-shouldered white dress, Prosecco in hand. "Good evening, everyone," she beamed. "Tonight isn't just a party, it's the beginning of something new for Rick and me." All eyes turned to her. I wondered how many times she rehearsed that speech in the mirror. "We've just finalized what I'd call a dream come true," Samantha announced, raising her glass. "The beachfront estate in Carmel is now being held for us. 6 bedrooms, infinity pool. And yes, a private beach. It's all thanks to hard work, vision, and knowing when to strike." Applause broke out. I glanced over at Rick. His brow furrowed as his phone lit up. He stared at it, then discreetly handed it to Samantha. She blocked him immediately. "Not now, Rick, I'm getting to the best part." "But it's..." "No, don't ruin this." She turned back to the group, glowing. "We've already placed the deposit, and we'll be signing the final paperwork next week." I stood still, took a calm sip of sparkling apple cider, and set the glass down. The moment had come. "Sam," I said, soft as a breeze but loud enough to hush the crowd, "I think you should check your email." Samantha frowned. "Excuse me?" Rick leaned in to whisper again. She snatched the phone, eyes scanning the screen rapidly. "No way," she muttered. "What is it?" my mom asked, her voice rising with concern. "The house. It was sold," Rick answered. 3 days ago. To someone else." Samantha turned to me, panic and confusion in her eyes. "No. That's impossible. They said they were holding it for me. I told everyone." "And that's the problem," I said, stepping forward and pulling up a document on my phone. "You talked, but never actually acted." I didn't say much, I just did it. I handed the phone to my mom. Her hands trembled as she read. "Emily, is this real?" "My name is on the title transfer," I stated. 3 days ago. "The deal is closed, paid in full. No one's holding anything anymore. The house belongs to me." The backyard went silent. Samantha stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. How did you even do this?" she asked, her voice cracking. 7 years of back-to-back ICU shifts, by not spending on what you called success. And by learning, quietly, from every single one of your bragging sessions at family dinners. Jeremy let out a quiet cough, clearly suppressing a laugh. My dad sighed. My mom sank into her seat, like the air had been sucked out of her. Rick spoke carefully. "Emily, you really own that house." I nodded. "Which is why tonight's event just turned into the most unintentionally funny performance we've ever seen." Samantha stood frozen, her face drained of color. "You did this? To humiliate me?" "No," I replied. "I did this to remind everyone, staying quiet doesn't mean being weak." I turned and walked away, leaving behind stunned silence and a sea of shattered assumptions. Samantha disappeared from the party right after I revealed the purchase agreement. My mother tried to stop her, but she pulled away and rushed into the house. Moments later, I heard a bedroom door slam upstairs. No one dared follow. The air, left behind, felt suspended, like we had just watched a play where the lead actor stormed off stage without warning. I stayed for another hour to chat with a few relatives. Most were more polite than in previous years. A few even said things like, "You're incredible," and "What a surprise." But I knew better. Their admiration only surfaced because my name now appeared on the deed. Before that, I was just Emily, the nurse. Probably doesn't know the first thing about investing. The next morning, I was sorting patient charts at the hospital when I got a message from Rick. "We need to talk, urgent." I left my shift a bit early and drove to a small cafe by the river. Rick was already there. No coffee, no phone. Just a black folder sitting on the table. "I know you bought the house," he said as I sat down. "And I know why Sam completely lost it." I nodded slightly. "Because she lost a game she thought she already won." Rick sighed and pushed the folder toward me. "It's more than that. These are statements from 3 credit cards in my name, 2 of which I never opened." I flipped through the pages. Charges from luxury boutiques, spas, first-class flights to Hawaii, Miami, New York. Over $8,000 spent every month. Total debt? More than $72,000. "Sam forged my signature," Rick said, eyes steady, but voice gravelly. "She also used my name to apply for a $50,000 personal loan from the local bank." I tightened my grip on the folder, a cold shock flooding my chest. I always thought Samantha was just flashy and shallow, but I hadn't realized she had crossed the moral line like this. "She planned to use the Carmel house as collateral," Rick continued. "She told me that once we secured the property, she'd take out a loan under the guise of investment, then use that to pay off everything before I caught on. And I ruined that plan," I murmured, heart heavy. "No," Rick said. "Emily, you saved me. Saved this entire family from a financial sinkhole I didn't even realize I was standing in." I sat in silence. "Do my parents know?" "Not yet. She hasn't even told them half the truth." Rick leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "Last night, after the party, I found the loan paperwork hidden in her vanity drawer. When I confronted her, she just cried and said, 'I just wanted to keep up appearances.' She admitted everything, even the forgery. I told her I needed time." I left at midnight. "What are you going to do?" Rick didn't answer right away. He opened his phone, tapped into the photo gallery and showed me a picture. A retainer invoice from a law firm that specializes in financial separations. "Appointment date, next Monday." "I don't know if this marriage is salvageable," he said slowly. "But one thing I do know. I can't keep pretending nothing's wrong while everything's collapsing." I didn't know what to say. I just rested my hand on the folder. Part of me felt relief that the truth had come out, but another part burned with bitterness. Samantha hadn't just ruined her own image, she'd dragged down the one person who had stood by her for a decade. Later that night, as I returned to my small apartment, I received a message from Mom. "Sam came home. It's worse than I thought. Can you come by tomorrow night? I don't know how to handle this." I stared at the message, torn. Should I go back and face this? Or let it unfold from the background like I always had? I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the Carmel House transfer papers. My name, Emily Sullivan, owner, stood boldly on the first page. I nodded to myself. This time, I won't step back. Not for anyone. Not for guilt. I'll walk in, face it, and speak the truth. Even if it means someone else has to break one more time. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6 p.m., just like Mom had asked. The Oregon sky that evening was overcast, thick gray clouds signaling a storm brewing. Not outside, but inside the living room, where nearly the entire family was already gathered. My father stood as I entered, his expression tenser than I'd ever seen. Mom sat curled on the edge of the couch, gripping a napkin like it was the last thing she could control. Samantha sat in the center of the room, hands clasped tightly. Gone were the designer clothes and flawless makeup. She wore an old sweater and jeans, her hair tied back hastily. If I didn't know better, I'd have thought she was someone else entirely. "Emily, thank you for coming," my mother began, trying to keep her voice soft. "Sam has something she'd like to say." I nodded, set down my bag and took the seat across from them. "I'm listening." Samantha took a deep breath. "I've done a lot of thinking. About everything. About what I've done. And I want to make things right." I said nothing. I know I've hurt you, she continued. I let pride and fear control everything, but the house in Carmel? That's my only chance to start over. I frowned. Start over how? By using it as collateral to pay off credit card debt? Or by building another fake image to cover financial collapse? She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I need that house. No, I replied evenly. You need accountability. My dad stepped in, his voice rough. We're not here to assign blame. We want a solution. If you could sell the house back, or maybe transfer it somehow? I turned to him. I bought that house with savings, smart investments, and ICU night shifts that nearly broke me. While everyone assumed I was struggling with a nurse's salary, I was building something stable. No loans, no hiding. Emily, my mom said, her eyes pleading, she's your sister. And I'm your daughter, I said, more directly than ever before. But all these years, when did you take my side? Or did you just listen to Samantha and decide I was never quite good enough? The room grew thick with silence. Samantha looked up, her cheeks flushed. I didn't mean it like that. I was trying to help. No, I cut in. You were trying to protect your image. And when I stopped playing the supporting role you assigned me, I became a threat. My mom began to cry. My father stayed quiet, his gaze fixed on the carpet. Okay? Samantha said finally, her voice suddenly smaller. If I can't buy the house, maybe I can rent it. I need somewhere stable. I'll pay on time. I just need time to rebuild. Sam, I said calmly, if you truly want help, there are a dozen other ways. But using that house as a lifeline to keep pretending? No. I won't enable that. Samantha's hands clenched, her voice trembled. You're destroying my life. No. I stood. I'm saving you from the part of yourself that already did. I pulled out my phone and opened the text from Rick, Samantha's estranged husband, now living separately. It included screenshots, credit card statements, consumer loans, forged signatures. I placed the phone on the table, screen facing my parents. If you still think I'm the one being unfair by not handing over the house, take a look at what she's done. How much debt is in Rick's name? How much has she hidden behind this smart investor facade? Do you really want to mortgage this house to rescue someone who's never learned responsibility? The room fell completely silent. My mom sobbed. My dad took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I didn't come here to shame her. I said more gently. I came to protect what I worked so damn hard for. And I won't let anyone, not even family, take that away to fix their mistakes. I bent down, picked up my bag. If she truly wants to start over, then she can start with honesty. And I walked out the front door, leaving behind a house stifled by years of favoritism, illusions, and a reckoning no one dared face. Until tonight. 2 weeks after that tense family meeting, I sat alone on the balcony of my beachfront house in Carmel, watching the waves quietly roll against the rocks. The ocean breeze was cold but soothing, like an invisible hand calming my thoughts after days filled with conflict and emotional strain. I had done a lot of thinking. Not about Samantha, but about family. About the generations to come. About how, if I truly wanted to change something in the old, toxic cycle of this family, buying the house wouldn't be enough. I needed a bolder step. A new system. A structure that didn't revolve around favoritism, pretense, and secrets. And so, I created the Emily Sullivan Family Trust. I hired a lawyer, Margot Henley, a specialist in family law and asset management. It took us 3 meetings to draft the trust charter and legally transfer the ownership of the house from my name into the trust. It may have sounded crazy to some, but I knew I was doing the right thing. I didn't want the house to be a symbol of personal victory anymore. I wanted it to become something meaningful and lasting. Not for Samantha, but for those who truly valued what it represented. The conditions for using the house were clearly outlined in the trust charter. Any family member wishing to use the house must prove financial stability. No outstanding credit card debt. No history of financial fraud in the past 3 years. Each user must complete at least one financial counseling session with a professional appointed by the trust. The trust will cover the cost. Access to the house will only be granted if the financial advisor deems the person stable enough. No one is allowed to use the property as collateral under any circumstance. Any disputes over access will be handled by a neutral third-party arbitrator. I also included a surprise clause: 10% of all revenue generated, if the property is ever used for vacation rentals, film shoots, or events, will go into a scholarship fund, specifically for future generations in the family pursuing medical or nursing education. "You're building a whole system?" my cousin Jeremy muttered as he read through the charter. "Are you sure Mom, Dad, and Sam will go along with this?" "I don't need their approval," I replied. "I need them to understand that from now on, no one gets to bend the rules just because their last name is Sullivan." That evening, I invited the family over. Not for a celebration, but for a formal announcement. My mother arrived first, her eyes still puffy from nights spent worrying about Samantha. My father followed, offering a silent nod. Samantha showed up last. Wearing a beige cardigan, no makeup, no jewelry. The room fell silent as I laid out the folders in front of each of them. "Tonight, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about the future." I walked them through the entire trust structure. Every clause, every limit, every option. With each word, Samantha's hands clenched tighter. When I got to the mandatory counseling requirement, she snapped, "Who do you think you are, setting all this up?" "The person who bought this house with her own effort," I replied, "and who is now placing it into a trust, so it can be used fairly by everyone." My father flipped through the pages, pausing at the clause labeled Financial Transparency. He looked at me and nodded slowly. "Well done, Emily." My mother said nothing. But when I placed a hand gently on her shoulder, she gripped it tightly. I knew she understood, even if she couldn't say it yet. Samantha didn't sign. She stood halfway through, tossed the trust charter onto the table and said, "I don't need some charity disguised as rules telling me how to live my life." "No one's forcing you," I said, "but if you want to use this house, or any property connected to this trust, you'll need to follow the same rules as everyone else." Rick stepped out from the kitchen, where he had silently listened the whole time. "Emily's giving us a second chance. Not everyone gets that." Samantha paused at the door and looked back. A second chance? Or just another pretty trap to control everyone? I looked her straight in the eye. "Not everyone needs saving, Sam. But everyone deserves boundaries. And for the first time in this family, those boundaries are written into policy. For all, no exceptions." The door closed behind her, but this time, I felt no guilt. I felt clarity. I felt steady. 1 week after the trust announcement, I received a message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "I want to start over." It was Samantha. I didn't reply right away. I needed to be sure this wasn't one of her usual ploys, those polished apologies that always led back to the same patterns. But 3 days later, I got an email from the financial counseling office working with the trust. "Samantha Sullivan has completed her initial financial assessment and enrolled in the volunteer debt restructuring program." I sat still, staring at the screen, surprised, cautious. For the first time, Samantha had taken a concrete step toward accountability without the dramatics. No blame. No excuses. Just action. I hadn't spoken to her until the trust's first executive meeting, where Jeremy was keeping the minutes and overseeing financial eligibility. The meeting took place in the living room at the Carmel house, bathed in soft morning light. My parents were there, Rick, too, seated quietly in the corner. And then Samantha walked in, wearing a plain shirt and jeans. No perfume. No designer shoes. No diamond-studded watch. "Hi everyone," she said quietly. No hair flip, no superiority in her eyes. Just Samantha. Bare. And maybe, for the first time, sincere. "I know I'm not exactly welcome here," she continued, standing tall. "And I'm not asking for any privileges. I just wanted you to know I've started the counseling program. I've canceled all my credit cards, closed out my discretionary accounts, and started paying off debts, one by one." Jeremy glanced at her updated credit report on the iPad and gave a small confirming nod. I said nothing. "I don't expect Emily to forgive me," Samantha said, turning toward me. "But I hope you can at least see." "I'm trying." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope, placing it on the table. Inside were all the documents related to the credit lines, loan accounts, and most importantly, the signature verification reports proving Samantha had forged Rick's name on multiple transactions. The room fell into silence. I slid the envelope toward Rick. "You have every right to take this to an attorney, if you want." Rick opened the envelope, scanning page after page, eyes steady on the lines of black ink. When he reached the last sheet, he looked up at Samantha. "You've done a lot to lose my trust." Samantha lowered her gaze, said nothing. "I've thought long and hard about this," Rick said evenly. "And I believe everyone deserves one chance. Just one." He pulled out the final document, the affidavit confirming fraud, and slowly tore it in half. No one clapped. No one sighed with relief. Just a moment of quiet, between people finally choosing to face what they'd rather avoid. "I don't need the house," Samantha said after a while. "I don't need to own anything right now. I just want to learn how to keep what actually matters." I nodded. "If you continue the counseling program, pay off at least 50% of your debt within 18 months, and don't create new liabilities, you'll be eligible to apply for use of the house. Same as everyone else." "And if I fail?" she asked, eyes unblinking. "Then you can still come here," I said calmly. "But as a guest, not a beneficiary." She nodded. "That's fair." My father spoke for the first time that morning. "I'm proud of both of you." My mother wiped her eyes. This time not from heartbreak, but from relief. After the meeting, Samantha stepped onto the balcony. I followed, standing beside her, both of us staring at the ocean. We didn't speak for several minutes. "I used to think you'd never change," I said softly. "I used to think I didn't need to," Samantha replied. "Turns out, we were both wrong." I turned to look at my sister. For the first time, I didn't see a rival or a threat, I just saw a woman, trying to peel off the mask. I didn't forgive her right then, but I had opened the first door. Whether or not she stepped through was entirely up to her. 3 months after the first trust meeting, I walked out of the 12th floor glass office of Coastal Development Group in Monterey with a signed partnership agreement in hand. The ocean wind cut sharply across the walkway to the parking lot, laced with salt and the sting of February cold. But all I felt was quiet triumph. No spotlight, no applause. Just the solid weight of a victory, earned. The agreement allowed Coastal Development to build a luxury resort adjacent to the land our family trust owned in Carmel. In return, the Sullivan Trust retained full ownership of the beachfront estate and received 20% of all service-based profits generated from events held on the shared shoreline. Weddings, film shoots, corporate retreats. All proceeds would feed into 2 supporting funds, a maintenance reserve, and the Clara Sullivan Medical Fund, named after my grandma. That scholarship fund wouldn't just support family members pursuing careers in medicine, nursing, or public health, it would also offer 2 full scholarships annually to exceptional, underprivileged students from Monterey County. When I presented this at the April trust meeting, the room went still. not in disagreement, but because no one expected me to take it that far. My father, who once reserved all his praise for Samantha's strategic thinking, looked at me with something close to awe. "You're doing something I never imagined," he said. "Not just for our family, but for people who aren't even related to us." Jeremy, acting as secretary of the trust, murmured, "Emily, you've turned this house into something that produces value, not just something that looks good." He smirked, then looked at Samantha. "And you did it without an MBA." Samantha didn't argue. She simply nodded and said quietly, "I used to think success meant being admired. Now, I think it means being able to lift your head without having to apologize." Her changes weren't loud, but they were real. She moved into a smaller apartment, handled her own finances, traded in the least luxury SUV for a used sedan. The thing that shocked me most: she completed all 3 basic finance courses in the Trust's recovery program. One weekend, she volunteered to help run a financial literacy workshop at our old high school. Watching her stand on that small auditorium stage, talking about taking responsibility for your own mistakes, I knew she wasn't the same Samantha anymore. Our family dynamic shifted too. Not everyone became close overnight, but the favoritism was gone. When my niece, my eldest brother's daughter, said she wanted to become a pediatrician, my mom was the first to speak up. "If you really want to do it, sweetheart, I'll talk to Aunt Emily about the scholarship process." I turned to my mother in surprise. She took my hand. No apology, no explanation. But in her eyes I finally saw it. Recognition. The kind I had waited my whole childhood for. Change didn't come in a single sweeping moment. It came in small acts, repeated choices, and a system built on fairness, not habit. Every family member now had to apply in advance to use the Carmel house, submit proof of financial standing, and follow a rotating usage schedule. No exceptions. Not even me. Even Rick, who had once borne the brunt of Samantha's recklessness, returned. Not as Samantha's ex-husband, but as a part-time investment advisor to the trust. Together, we launched a new initiative for youth in the area. Early financial thinking for future generations. "You didn't just save a house," Rick told me. "You're rebuilding the foundation for everyone who comes after us." The June trust meeting closed with Jeremy reading the first quarterly financial report. $68,000, 0 cents in revenue from the Coastal Partnership. $25,000, 0 cents had already gone into the scholarship fund. The rest was being used to renovate the kitchen and community areas at the house. As everyone got up to leave, Samantha approached me with a small box in hand. "I found this in Mom's old room," she said. "You should have it." Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandma Clara, the one she wrote to me when I left for college. I had never read it. It vanished a week after I got the envelope. Her slanted cursive still looked like it had been written yesterday. "Emily, you don't have to be loud to prove your worth. Just do the right thing. And the world will have no choice but to listen." I held the letter tight, looked up at Samantha. "Thank you," I said. She smiled, truly, for the first time in years, not because she needed to be seen, but because finally she understood that she was enough. That summer, Samantha officially completed the 6-month financial counseling program, with a positive evaluation from the independent advisor. She had paid off nearly 40% of her total debt, voluntarily liquidated all non-essential assets, and permanently closed 4 credit card accounts. Gone were the designer brands, luxury cars, and overpriced Sundays. Instead, she lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the west side of Eugene, and worked as a sales assistant at a small real estate office. "For the first time in my life," she told me, "I feel lighter, not having to pretend I'm someone I'm not." The family gradually began to accept this new version of Samantha, not because she was perfect, but because this time, she was genuinely trying. At the November trust meeting, she proposed launching a financial literacy workshop series for single mothers in rural areas. "Not everyone's lucky enough to have someone pull them out of the mess like I did," she said, her voice steady. My mother began speaking to her more, not as a child to be protected, but as an adult to be listened to. My father, who had once trusted Samantha blindly, had grown more cautious but no longer harsh. He became the internal auditor of the trust, working with Jeremy to double-check funding approvals and maintain full transparency. On a December afternoon, our extended family gathered at the Carmel house to decorate for the holidays. Samantha carefully strung lights along the balcony, while my mother and I prepped gingerbread in the kitchen. As I reached for ingredients in the cupboard, Mom handed me a small oak box. "This is yours," she said. "Grandma Clara left it in her old closet. She meant to give it to you when you graduated, but, well, things got messy." I opened the box. Inside was a silver-plated necklace, its pendant engraved with the words, "Silence is not weakness." I clutched the gift, feeling the weight of years collapsing into that one moment. The night shifts, the dismissive stares, the words that were never answered. None of it felt like pain anymore. It felt like foundation. We had dinner outside that evening, under soft yellow lights and cool winter air. No more passive-aggressive comparisons, no more half-jokes loaded with old resentment. Just laughter, the scent of grilled food, and a strange new peace. Rick joined us too, not as a bitter outsider but as someone steady. Though he hadn't reconciled with Samantha, he remained in contact and supported her in key decisions. "I don't know what comes next," he told me as we stood near the Christmas tree, untangling ornaments, "but at least now she's being honest. With me and with herself." And that's enough to keep me from walking away. As for me, I no longer felt the need to prove anything. The trust was running smoothly, the scholarship program had expanded into a neighboring county, and I had started partnering with a nonprofit health organization to bring basic financial literacy into community college nursing programs. During a year-end workshop hosted by the Trust, I gave a short speech. It was the first time I had ever said this out loud. I used to think success meant recognition. But now I understand, real success is holding on to your values in silence, and letting your actions tell the story. The audience applauded, not just the guests, but my family too. Jeremy leaned over and whispered as we left, "You didn't just change the rules, Emily, you changed how everyone here defines success." I smiled, my eyes drifting toward the dark ocean. The waves still crashed, the sky still held its silence, but inside me, everything had shifted. No more pain buried in silence. No more dreams kept small. No more sister looking down at me like a shadow. Just a family. Not perfect, but learning to heal together. I didn't buy this house to get even. I bought it to protect myself. But it became something more. A beginning. A place where kindness could outlast resentment. And where values stood not on the loudest voice in the room, but on the one patient enough to listen and act when it mattered. And just like Grandma Clara wrote, silence is not weakness. Sometimes, it's the only way to rebuild. Solid, lasting, and unshakable. Emily's story reminds us that silence doesn't mean weakness, and quiet determination can create the most lasting change. In real life, many people silently endure unfairness, favoritism, or pressure from their families. But when they find the courage to set boundaries and act on their values, everything can shift. True success isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding with fairness, strength, and compassion. Sometimes, the bravest choice is to walk away, quietly but firmly. What do you think about Emily's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life, family, and transformation. They buried my father on a rainy morning, but what paralyzed me wasn't the weather. It was the funeral program. Thick, glossy, with a photo of my sister holding Dad's hand on the cover. And not a single word about me. No name, No mention of younger daughter, not even a seat near the family. I sat in the back row, like an outsider at the very funeral of the man who once called me the pride of his life. Then my sister took the mic, chin high, voice calm like she was accepting a medal. My father left everything to me. His career, his passion, and his legacy. I looked around. No one flinched. They applauded. They applauded. As I was erased. My name is Camilla Dawson. I'm 36 years old. I co-founded Dawson Ventures, a real estate and tech investment firm in Northern California. People used to say I was the strategic brain, and my sister Vanessa was the public face. But don't be fooled. I built the plans. I built everything from scratch when my father, Richard Dawson, barely knew how to send an email. My father died from a sudden stroke without warning. But that wasn't as painful as discovering I had been slowly cut out of his legacy, piece, by my own family. The funeral took place at Lambert & Sons Funeral Home in Palo Alto, a place known for hosting some of the most prominent financial figures. I came alone, not because I had no family, but because they had all chosen the other side. 3 black Cadillacs pulled up front, and I saw them. My mother, my sister Vanessa, her husband Jason, and the current board of directors. They walked through the main entrance. I took the side door. I wasn't listed at the reception. One staffer asked, "Are you family?" I pressed my lips. "I'm his daughter." She paused, checked the list again, then murmured, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't see your name." "It's fine," I answered coldly. "Just find me a seat where I can hear the speeches." They placed me near the back of the hall, next to the section for distant acquaintances. People who only knew my father through business cards. I looked up at the stage. Vanessa walked out in a tight black dress. Eyes confident, hand on the podium. "My father," she began, "was a man of vision, and today as the rightful CEO of Dawson Ventures, I promise to continue the mission he started." No mention of me. Not a word about the daughter who sat beside him through hundreds of meetings, bleeding through the startup years. When the memorial video played, I fought back tears. Clips of my father shaking hands with presidents, cutting ribbons, standing at industry conferences. But not one single image of him with me, even though I took 70% of those photos. The funeral ended with applause and champagne. Yes, champagne. They raised their glasses and said he had lived a glorious life. I walked out the old way, past cold hallways, my chest tightening into stone. But I still didn't cry. Not yet. 3 days later, I received an invitation to the reading of the will at the family's legal firm, Lawrence & Weller, LLP. I arrived on time. There were 6 people in the room. My mother, my sister, 2 attorneys, a financial advisor, and 1 empty chair. For me. The lawyer opened the will, reading in a steady tone. "Per the wishes of Mr. Richard Dawson, the following estate allocations shall proceed." I held my breath. The entirety of Dawson Ventures shares, including fixed assets, liquid accounts, commercial real estate, and intellectual property, shall be transferred fully to Mrs. Vanessa Dawson. I went numb. "As for Miss Camilla Dawson," he continued, voice unchanging, "she shall receive an honorary payment of $35,000 and a framed portrait of Mr. Richard Dawson from his former office." No one said a word. No one looked at me. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, the corner of her mouth rising like she wanted to say, "You don't belong here." I sat still, eyes fixed on the table. How? What had I done to deserve this brutal erasure? $35,000, a painting, while the company was valued at nearly $450 million. The lawyer turned to me. "Miss Dawson, would you like to respond?" I stood. "No," I said. "Let the truth respond for me." I left the office without looking back, but I knew this wasn't over. I tried to convince myself things would quiet down, that one unfair will couldn't erase 10 years of building. But then, A single email blew that illusion apart. A week after the reading, I sat in my Oakland penthouse, coffee long cold. My inbox pinged. Subject line raw and blunt. Congrats, Vanessa. All clean now. The email had been sent to my old company address. One I thought had been deactivated. But apparently the system still routed it to my personal inbox, like a ghost that refused to die. I opened it. Sender: Abby Tran, Vanessa's executive assistant. The message was short. She has it all now. No loose ends. Transfer finalized. Camila's out. Cheers. I read it again and again, my heart pounding. Transfer? What transfer? I tore through my archives. I didn't recall signing any agreement to relinquish my shares to Vanessa. But when I accessed the old internal data system, using a backdoor script I'd set up for emergencies, I found something that hit like a punch to the throat. A PDF file. Titled, Internal Transfer, Legal Authorization, 4/3/2020. My signature was there. Neat, complete. Under Transferring Party, Camila Dawson. Under Receiving Authority and Full Asset Control, Vanessa Dawson. I froze. 2020. That was when I was managing the acquisition deal in Austin. And yes, Vanessa had once asked me to sign some documents to streamline accounting for a temporary branch merger. I remembered that night. She poured me a glass of white wine, smiled softly. Camilla, you worry too much, it's just some temporary paperwork. Trust me, okay? I had trusted her. Like a blind fool. But what I signed wasn't this. I remembered clearly. The document I reviewed was a limited 90-day authorization for the Texoma branch. No clauses about asset transfers or full control of the entire corporation. I raced to the office of Ronald Greaves, my private attorney since business school. His office was on the 19th floor of the Sapphire Building downtown. Ron looked concerned when I slammed the folder down. They used my hand to strangle me, Ron. He examined the file, page by page. His lips tightened at my signature. This is your real signature. But the content was altered. And this version lacks a clear effective date. It wasn't even notarized properly. Azine, I signed a different version. Not this one. Then they swapped it. They kept the original version you signed, edited the content later, reprinted it and embedded your signature either by scan or stitching it from an old file. Do you still have the version you signed? I shook my head. It was the end of the day. Vanessa said she'd send me the notarized copy later. I trusted her. Ron sighed and looked at me. We can prove fraud if we find the original draft or someone who witnessed the signing. Is there anyone who knows about it? I closed my eyes. A name slashed through my mind like a knife in the dark. Derek Sloan. Derek was a temporary legal assistant at the company during that time, responsible for reviewing contracts and power of attorney documents. He was present when I signed. I remember the look in his eyes as I picked up the pen. But he disappeared not long after. Let go due to restructuring in the legal department. I pulled out my phone and dialed. No answer. I checked LinkedIn. His profile was still up, freelancing in San Diego. I messaged. Derek, I need to talk, urgent. About the 2020 authorization document. 3 minutes later he replied. I knew this day would come, send me the address. I'll be there. 3 days later, at a small cafe in the Mission District, Derek showed up looking more worn out than I remembered. He pulled a USB drive from his coat pocket. I kept the original draft and the internal emails between Vanessa and the legal department. I almost deleted them. But something stopped me. I held my breath as he opened the file on his laptop, the original version I had signed, completely different from the one Vanessa used to seize power. There was also an email from Vanessa, sent internally to the company's lawyers. She doesn't need to know. As long as the signature matches. We'll adjust the content and file a new copy with a matching timestamp. No one's going to check. My vision went dark. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan. Crafted, deliberate, executed by my own sister. The one who once called me her partner. I left the cafe with a ringing in my ears, my heart pounding like a war drum. But this time, I didn't run. I pulled out my phone and texted Ron. I have proof. And I'm ready to begin. The sky wasn't raining that day, but the air was thick like a warning. What Vanessa thought was her victory was now the blade turning against her. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't burn it all down. I would expose everything, every signature, every lie, with the brutal precision she once taught me to wield. I used to believe that even if I lost my shares, my authority, at least my name would remain in the company's history. I was wrong. 3 weeks after meeting with Derek, I received an invitation from an old friend, Lena Morris, who used to work in the company's marketing department. She invited me to attend the launch event for Dawson Ventures' new branding campaign. You should come, Lena said. Voice hesitant. You need to see what they've done. The event was held at the Pacific Regency Hotel, right in the heart of San Francisco. I went with Ron. We pretended to be business guests. No one noticed. We were just two faces among hundreds of investors, partners, and press, packed into the ballroom. On stage, a massive LED screen displayed the new slogan, Dawson Ventures, Redefining Legacy. Below it was a photo of Vanessa in a white suit, standing in front of the headquarters with a stern gaze. Beside it read, Sole Founder. Direct Heir. I froze. Since when had I, the legal co-founder, the one who stood by my father from the garage days, been erased from every line of introduction? Then, the video began. The first scene showed my father, Richard Dawson, speaking at a 2012 investment seminar. In the original video, I clearly remember standing beside him, nodding after every line, holding the mic and presenting the strategy. But in this version, I was completely cut. The angles were changed. Only Vanessa appeared next to him, as if she alone had been there that day. I clenched my hands so tightly my nails drew blood. The next clip showed a 2015 contract signing. The pivotal moment we expanded into Arizona. I had been the lead negotiator with our partners. Everyone in senior leadership knew that. But in the edited version, my dialogue was replaced by Vanessa's voice. My speaking segment was swapped out for her silent nod. The entire video was refashioned like a political propaganda reel. When it reached the History of Dawson Ventures documentary, I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. In 7 minutes my name was never mentioned, no photos, no narration, no small caption. Every early group photo was cropped or repositioned. One original image with me at the center was flipped into a portrait of just my father and Vanessa. They used editing software to erase every trace of me, as if I never existed. I turned to Ron and whispered through clenched teeth. She didn't just steal the company, she's erasing my presence from records and memory. Ron didn't reply. He just pulled out his phone and began recording the entire screen presentation. We left the ballroom before the speeches started. I didn't need to hear Vanessa drone on about the future of the company. A future built on the burial of my past. That night, I returned home and opened my laptop. I searched through every file I had. Emails, proposals, presentation decks, original footage from our earliest conferences. I had everything. I had been the one filming, writing, presenting. My father and I built Dawson Ventures from the ground up like two mad engineers chasing a dream. Vanessa only arrived after the first office lease and the first revenue stream. I reopened the 2012 conference footage, the unedited version. I was there, standing tall, white shirt, hair tied back, eyes lit, as I spoke about the intersection of real estate and artificial intelligence. I talked for 4 full minutes, met with thunderous applause. Not Vanessa. No one else. I saved a new copy, titled, Cannot Erase. I also found an internal email I had written in 2016 to the executive board, proposing international expansion. My full name, timestamp, and responses from my father and directors were all included. Vanessa wasn't part of that email chain at all. The deeper I searched, the more I saw how much had been altered. She hadn't just manipulated the present, she was rewriting the past. A week later, I received an anonymous message with a link to Dawson Ventures' newly released PR archive. I clicked. The Founder's Handbook, distributed to business students, was entirely Vanessa's narrative. Stories she'd never lived. Victories she never earned. I opened a blank Word document. At the top, I typed one line. I didn't disappear, I was made to disappear. I didn't need to scream to be seen, I needed light, truth. And if Vanessa wanted to rewrite the story in her version, I'd show her. History isn't a PowerPoint slide you can edit at will. It's written in blood, sweat, and loyalty. The one thing she never had. I didn't expect the first piece of evidence to arrive on a rainy night. It was 2:43 in the morning. I was sitting by the window, holding a cold cup of tea, my mind heavy. The documents I had gathered were scattered across the table like the aftermath of a violent raid. Rain tapped against the porch roof like a frantic heartbeat. I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but because I knew deep down that a missing piece was still out there. Then my phone buzzed. No call, no message, just an email. No subject, no sender. Just one attached file. Will_draft_handnote_2p. I hesitated for a few seconds. My first instinct was doubt. Scam, malware, some sick joke? But something in my gut told me. Open it. The screen lit up, casting a pale blue glow into the dark room. The PDF loaded slowly, as if even the data understood the weight of the moment. And I almost stopped breathing. On screen was a handwritten will with blue ink annotations, the kind of ink my father always used, the one he called the color of trust. The first line began in his familiar slanted handwriting. I, Richard Dawson, being of sound mind and acting voluntarily, hereby declare the distribution of my personal estate as follows. I skimmed past the introduction. When I reached the section on company assets, the same one that the official will had left entirely to Vanessa, this version was completely different. Shares in Dawson Ventures will be divided equally between my two daughters, Vanessa Dawson and Camila Dawson, 50% each. Both shall hold equal voting rights, and I trust they will continue to grow the company in their own ways, with integrity. Directly below, a note written in all caps, circled in dark blue ink. Camila will handle it the right way. I choked up, not from pain, but from finally being able to breathe again. My father hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't turned his back on me, like I'd once believed. That one simple sentence shattered the resentment I had carried for so long. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. What I felt in that moment wasn't emotion. It was purpose. I studied the date. The will was written on March 14, 2023, 32 days before his final hospitalization. He had still been fully lucid. At the bottom, his signature, strong and firm. Impossible to forge. But the most chilling part wasn't the content. It was how this document had vanished. Why had I never seen this in any legal meeting? Why hadn't Cass and Barlow, our family's law firm, ever mentioned it? I took a screenshot, saved copies across 3 different storage platforms, and sent the PDF to Ron with a single message. Track the source, verify legal status, tell no one, not even Lena. 3 hours later, when the rain had just stopped, I drove to my mother's house. An old estate in Woodside, 40 minutes from the city. I didn't call ahead. She opened the door with a face like carved stone. That same calculated calm I'd known for 36 years. "What are you doing here at this hour?" she asked, coffee in hand, not inviting me in. "I just have one question," I said. "Did Dad ever tell you how he planned to divide the company?" She frowned slightly. "He said Vanessa was more suitable." "Why? What about splitting the shares equally?" Her eyes flicked. In that split second, I saw guilt flash like a shard of broken mirror catching the light. "No, that was never discussed." "Then what do you know about the handwritten will dated March 14th of last year?" Silence. Her hand gripped the coffee mug tighter, almost spilling it. "Who told you?" "The only one who needed to, in his own handwriting." I turned around without waiting for a reaction. Before leaving, I placed a printed copy of the PDF on the porch table, with the circled note. "Camilla will handle it the right way." I didn't need a confession. I needed disruption. And I had just planted it in her mind. That evening, Ron called back, his voice tight with energy. I checked. That will did exist in Cass and Barlow's system, but it was removed 3 days after Richard was hospitalized. It was marked as a temporary submission, but never formally filed. Who submitted the final version? Vanessa. She filed a new one, completely omitting your name. The file has a note. Father agreed to simplify structure. But there's no video record. No witnesses except a private notary, who has since left and can't be contacted. I exhaled. Cold. Well, what do we have? We have an original draft, written while he was still medically sound, signed, and evidence that the final version was filed without proper verification. If you want to go to court. This is the beginning of the Bay Area's biggest inheritance lawsuit. I stared at my screen. The words, "Camilla will handle it the right way," still glowed among thousands of files. No one else would handle this for me. Not anymore. Now it was my turn. Not for revenge, but to restore the truth to where it belongs. I knew I couldn't walk into this battlefield alone. Vanessa didn't just have power, she had money, legal teams, and a PR machine sharp enough to turn crime into a success story. If I was going to flip the board, I needed allies. And I knew exactly who to call. The first was Marcellus Reed, former chief financial officer of Dawson Ventures, from its founding year until his abrupt retirement 3 years ago. He was the only person who had seen me work side by side with my father. Nights spent auditing budgets, 20-tab Excel sheets, strategy drafts I scribbled before typing for hours. I called him on Monday morning, just before sunrise. He picked up after 3 rings. "Camilla? I need to meet. Urgent. About Vanessa. About the company." A pause. Then 4 words. "Meet me, in Redwood." We met at an old records facility, once used by Dawson Ventures to store original documents before going fully digital. The steel door groaned open with a heavy screech. The smell of old paper and rusted metal hung in the air like a government archive. Marcellus led me to an unmarked filing cabinet. He unlocked it, pulled out a drawer, and laid a thick folder sealed in plastic on the table. I kept originals of all board meeting minutes from 2013 to 2020. Plus early versions of internal policy drafts, where your name is listed as co-author, co-signer. I carefully flipped through each page. It was definitely my signature. My father's handwriting was right beside it. I recognized the scribbled notes immediately. I had written them at 3 in the morning, in my old apartment, after Dad called and said, "I need a draft by tomorrow." Vanessa erased me from the company's history. I said quietly. Marcellus nodded, his eyes filled with bitterness. "And now it's time you take back every piece they cut out." I brought all the certified copies to Ron's office. He immediately contacted a handwriting verification expert to authenticate each document, but one crucial piece was still missing. Technical proof of digital alterations. The tool Vanessa had used to make me vanish from the system. And only one person could help with that. Lyndon Poe. Lyndon had been a software engineer on Dawson Ventures' internal migration team in 2021, during the shift to cloud infrastructure. That was also when every trace of me was erased. After being suddenly removed from the team, he started a cybersecurity firm in Berkeley. I found him on a rainy afternoon. His office had only 2 employees. Lyndon came out, leaner than before, but his eyes still sharp. Camila, I thought you weren't in the system anymore. I'm not. That's the problem. I explained everything. The will, Marcellus's evidence, and how I needed him to find traces of technical manipulation. Any system logs that proved data tied to me had once existed, then was edited, renamed, or deleted from the original records. Lyndon nodded, then exhaled. You have no idea how long I've waited for a reason to dive back into that mess. 3 days later, Lyndon called. I found it. I went straight to his office. On screen, he showed me restored log entries pulled from a backup archive. The kind the IT team thought they'd erased. The commands were clear. USDA_402-project_lead, Camila Dawson. Timestamp, April 22, 2020, 11:48 p.m. Override_applied, project_lead, changed to Vanessa Dawson. Timestamp, April 23, 2020, 2:13 a.m. They didn't delete you, Lyndon said, his voice rough. They replaced you, like you were just a placeholder they could rename. I stared at the white text on a black screen and felt a chill. Can you prove the source of the change? Yes, I have a full snapshot of the original system, and I also have emails from the marketing team discussing the optimization of leadership image. They referred to you as not compatible with the modern brand identity. I smiled. Not from joy, but because I knew this was undeniable evidence. I asked Lyndon to back up all the data onto a separate encrypted hard drive, time-stamped and signed for chain of custody. I would use it like a dagger, not to stab in the dark, but to dissect what they thought they had buried forever. On the way home, I stopped halfway across the Bay Bridge, looking out at the dark waters. I thought of my father, the man who wrote "Camilla will handle it the right way," with a hand that trembled but never broke. I couldn't save him, but I could save the truth. And I had just claimed the first sword. No blood had spilled, but the war had begun. The elevator stopped on the 29th floor with a cold ding. I stood before the frosted glass doors of Dawson Ventures' executive boardroom, the stage that used to be mine. I wasn't back to ask for a seat. I came to break the table they built on lies. Inside, the room looked like a futuristic warship. Elliptical glass table, LED walls, muted golden lighting. 12 people were already seated. Board members, legal advisors, investment reps, and at the head of the table, none other than Vanessa Dawson, hair pulled into a tight bun, crimson lips, white suit like she was ready to run for president. She glanced at me for a second, then turned away. No greeting, no nod, she didn't need to. In Vanessa's eyes, I was just a ghost stepping out from a past she thought she had buried. I didn't bring a lawyer. No laptop. Just me. A USB drive in hand, and a thick folder clamped shut in a steel clip. Mark Pennington, the board chair, spoke first. Today's meeting is to focus on next quarter's brand strategy, and I've been informed that Camila Dawson has something to present. I stepped toward the table. No preamble. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to deliver the truth. Something this company has distorted for the last 2 years. One click. The screen behind me lit up. The first slide appeared. Fabricated history, Dawson Ventures. I plugged in the USB, launching the first video. It was the original 2012 investment conference, footage of me standing next to my father, explaining our expansion strategy. My face illuminated under stage lights, my voice steady and clear. The screen then switched to the edited clip. I was gone, replaced by Vanessa. The room fell into dead silence. I turned around, my voice like ice. She didn't just replace me in the company. She erased me from its history. Vanessa interrupted, smooth as honey. We chose the version that best represented the brand. Not everyone fits the media image. I didn't let her redirect. I opened the folder, pulling out my father's handwritten will, in color, verified by handwriting and date experts. This is the original, not the one you altered and submitted to court. My father split shares equally. And he wrote clearly, "Camilla will handle it the right way." I handed copies to each board member. Some looked at me. Others turned to Vanessa, searching for a reaction. I continued the slides. Legal documents verified by Ron. Internal emails pulled from the archive, where Vanessa's PR team discussed removing non-banned line founders. They called me non-strategic, but I drafted the first financial roadmap. I led the Arizona expansion deal. I was there from day one. When our office was a rented warehouse with a busted AC and flickering Wi-Fi. My voice didn't waver, every sentence was a blade. I didn't need to shout. Each word was dynamite beneath Vanessa's fabricated foundation. Lyndon Poe, I gestured to the external hard drive on the table, restored system logs before they deleted my name. Line by line, traces they thought were gone. I displayed the override command. Proof: Vanessa had replaced my name with hers at 2 a.m. while I was hospitalized with pneumonia that year. By now, Vanessa wasn't smiling. Her face drained of color. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering something. I caught 2 words. Adjourn now. No one moved. I presented the letter my father had written to the law office just 12 days before he was hospitalized, with a handwritten note. I will meet with Camilla to finalize the terms. Proof that he had not approved the final will that Vanessa later submitted. Mark Pennington, who had remained silent until then, suddenly placed his hand on the table. Vanessa, is this true? Vanessa didn't answer. Her lips were pressed tight, her eyes locked on me, but I saw the struggle in that stare. Not arrogance anymore, but calculated panic. I closed the folder. I'm not asking for a title, I'm not seeking fame. I'm asking this board to look at the truth. Dawson Ventures was built by 2 people, and one of them has been erased from every memory, just to support a performance. I bowed my head. I didn't say another word. I let the evidence speak. 15 seconds of silence passed. Then a board member, Helen Chang, investment director at Raintree Capital, nodded. I'd like to motion for an immediate internal review session and freeze all public relations activity until this matter is investigated. Vanessa sat still like a statue. I walked out of the room. I didn't look back. The hallway wind blew strong, but it didn't make me cold. I knew I had just thrown a match into a house soaked in gasoline. And I would stand still, waiting for it to burn. 3 days after that fateful board meeting, Vanessa Dawson disappeared from the media. No more smug speeches, no more radiant smiles on the cover of Forbes Local. The entire PR campaign for brand repositioning was frozen indefinitely. Even Dawson Ventures' internal newsletter, once calling her the soul of innovation, dared not mention her name. On Friday evening at 6:03 p.m., Dawson Ventures released an official statement on its website. Ms. Vanessa Dawson has chosen to step down from her role as Chief Executive Officer to pursue personal initiatives. The board of directors thanks her for her contributions during her tenure. The words were cold, smooth, and soulless. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a staged retreat dressed up as a graceful exit. But the internet wasn't that naive. Within an hour of the statement being posted, the Baywire Finance Forum exploded with a new thread. Vanessa Dawson, delusional CEO taken down by her own sister? An anonymous account, clearly an internal source, leaked the full slide deck I had presented to the board. Not only were the documents posted, but also the video of me delivering the evidence of forgery, internal emails, and the clip of my father shaking my hand after our 2015 investment deal. From there, hashtags began spreading like wildfire. Truth behind Dawson. Camilla was there. Erase no more. Within 24 hours, the story reached major outlets like TechPulse, Business Now, and Corporate Radar. They dug into Vanessa's carefully constructed image, staged videos, inflated credentials, deliberately altered company history. One particular article from Corporate Radar hit hard. Vanessa Dawson is not just a failed executive, she is a case study in power manipulation through family ties and media control, all to erase the true co-founder, Camila Dawson. I read that piece at 2:00 a.m. in my apartment where only the wind whistling through the window breaks the silence. My heart didn't rejoice. I didn't smile. The only thing I felt was a deep exhaustion, like I had just lifted a building off my back. At 9:00 a.m. the next morning, Ron called, his voice full of urgency. "Camila, the board just passed an internal resolution. They're opening a formal investigation into Vanessa's leadership period, and they want you involved as a strategic advisor during the transition." I was quiet for a few seconds, then said each word clearly. "I'm not going back to that table, Ron. I'll build my own." He chuckled softly. He didn't disagree. But what I didn't expect was that the online community would drive this further than any courtroom. An anonymous former IT staffer submitted a set of documents to Baywire's public inbox, proving that Vanessa's team had forced employees to delete logs, modify metadata, and install lockout codes to prevent recovery of original data. Those who had remained silent started to speak up. One said they were fired after objecting to my name being removed from the founding board. Another said they were told to re-edit my speech and present it as Vanessa's before internal broadcasts. Each testimony was another dagger driven into the illusion Vanessa had built over 4 years. Then came the final blow. An HR employee leaked an audio recording of a private meeting between Vanessa and her media consultant, where she flatly said, "Camila might be the backbone, but I'm the face. The public remembers who's on camera, not who wrote the slides." That clip spread on Reddit and Twitter like a toxic virus. Comments poured in. The painful truth is, in every organization, there's always someone who steals someone else's spotlight. Vanessa Dawson wasn't cancelled because she was exposed, she was cancelled because she thought she was untouchable. Camila is living proof. You might be erased from the board, but no one can erase a real legacy. On the 7th day, Dawson Ventures released a new statement. They were suspending all media involving Vanessa Dawson, and officially removing her name from the internal founders registry. She never appeared in public again. Her social media accounts were deleted. The CEO's office was sealed for legal audit. I never received an apology. I didn't need one. That evening, I walked into my study and opened the metal cabinet. Inside was an old photo. My father and me, sitting on cardboard boxes, in an office with a single hanging bulb and a whiteboard full of scribbles. On the photo, my father had written in marker, "Every company has founders, but only a few have someone who protects its soul." I didn't need my name reattached to the lobby wall, because now, the world already knew who really built Dawson Ventures from the ashes of a dream. I stood on the steps of Innovation Hall at 5:00 p.m., holding an embossed invitation card with my name in gold. Camila Dawson, honored co-founder. The early autumn wind rustled the oak trees, carrying the scent of resin and aged wood. Everything around me was quiet, but inside me, it wasn't. I had lost a career, a name, and reclaimed every shard through a kind of resilience not everyone dares to carry. And now, they wanted me to walk on stage, stand beside the Dawson Ventures logo, and smile for photos. As if everything had just been a small misunderstanding that had been corrected. I didn't walk into the auditorium right away. I sat on a stone bench near the courtyard, watching people arrive for the ceremony. They were all well-dressed. They were all polite. They all pretended to forget that I had, once, been erased from the company's map. Ron had called me that morning, his voice cautious. "The board wants to invite you to receive the Founder's Honor Plaque at tonight's event. They've corrected your name on all internal documents and the official website." I replied simply, "I'll come. But I won't step on that stage." He paused for a moment, then said, "I understand." Inside the auditorium, the event began with polished speeches. They talked about the arduous startup journey, core values that can't be denied, and the return of a legacy. No one said my name until the final segment of the program. The person assigned to introduce me was Harrison Grant, the interim director recently appointed by the board to replace Vanessa. He got everything right, pronounced my name correctly, acknowledged my real accomplishments, even thanked me for helping restore fairness. I remained in my seat in the middle row, unmoving. A few people turned to look at me, waiting. I gently shook my head. Grant continued his speech without skipping a beat. Finally, he said, "And if Camila chooses not to come up on stage tonight, that does not make her any less. Her silence only emphasizes what truly matters. Honor is not returned through words, but through action." I lifted my head. For a moment, I felt the old anger drain from my chest like smoke after a wildfire. Soon after, the event ended. People began drifting toward the reception area. I stood, preparing to slip out quietly. But a voice behind me stopped me. "Miss Camila?" I turned. A young woman stood there, hair tied back neatly, wearing an intern name badge. Her eyes sparkled, and she held a worn notebook in her hand. "My name's Julia. I'm an intern in the Strategic Development Department. I just wanted to say, I read your real estate AI proposal from 2016. I think it's truly amazing." I was surprised, not by the compliment, but that someone so young still cared about a document buried for nearly a decade. "That proposal isn't in the system anymore," I said. "How did you read it?" "I found it in the raw data archive. When I heard what happened to you, being erased from the company's history, I wondered if anything you did was still out there. So I searched. I figured, if no one else remembers, I will." I looked at her for a long time, then smiled for the first time in months. Not a bitter smile, a warm one. "Thank you, Julia. That's the most beautiful thing you could do for someone who was erased." She blushed, then reached out her hand. "I am honored to shake yours." I took her hand. A small hand, but firm. Something stirred inside me. Not fire, not pain, but hope. That night, I didn't drive straight home. I went to the cabin in the suburbs of San Rafael, the one I used to retreat to during my startup days, where I wrote Dawson Ventures' first business plan, at a small wooden desk by the window. I cleaned up the old room, opened my laptop, and began writing a new document. Not a lawsuit, not a revenge memoir, but a launch plan for an entirely new project called the Anchor Initiative, a program to support founders who have been pushed out of the companies they created. I would use my voice, my experience, and my scars to help people like me no longer suffer in silence. I no longer needed them to put my name back on the company wall. I carved my name into a place that mattered more: the stories of those who refused to give up. When I turned off the lights, with only the sound of crickets outside the window, I realized I hadn't won back a title. I had reclaimed my voice. And sometimes, that is stronger than any throne. Camilla's story isn't just about reclaiming justice. It's a powerful reminder that truth can be buried, but never erased. Even when betrayed by family, her honor crushed, and her name wiped from history, Camilla chose not to seek revenge, but to stand for her true worth. She didn't need a stage, she needed the truth to be seen. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't taking back a title, but living in alignment with your values and dignity. What do you think about Camilla's journey? Did she make the right choice in standing for the truth instead of seeking revenge? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional and meaningful family stories to come.
My name is Melanie Rhodes. I'm 34 years old and live in the suburbs of Sacramento, California. 2 years ago, I bought my first home, a small red brick house with 2 bedrooms, a sunlit backyard, and a wooden front porch just big enough for a cafe table and a few pots of lavender. It wasn't just property. To me, it was living proof of a decade of hard work, late nights, and pushing through every doubtful look, especially from my own parents. I grew up in a traditional middle-class household. My father, Dennis, is a veteran who now works as a heavy-duty mechanic. My mother, Karen, used to be an office assistant, but quit when I entered high school, proudly declaring she was now managing the children and the family's finances. They had rigid principles about how children must repay and never forget where they came from. But to me, what they called tradition often felt like control wrapped in moral obligation. After high school, I wasn't allowed to choose an out-of-state college. They claimed sending me away was a waste of taxpayer money. Still, I secretly applied and won a full scholarship to a university in Phoenix, Arizona. When I told them I was leaving, my father threw the award letter onto the kitchen table and said, his voice dripping with contempt, "If you want to fly high, pay your own way. Don't come crawling back." I nodded, and from that day on, I never asked them for anything again. After graduation, with a degree in financial management, I started at the bottom of a small consulting firm. I worked weekend shifts, picked up extra hours during holidays, and never turned down a client. After 7 years, I got hired by Pacific Equity Group, and 3 years later, I became a branch director. I'm not trying to brag, but I climbed every step myself. Every dollar I earned came from real sweat. Last year, I finally had enough saved for a down payment on my first home. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't worth millions, but it was mine. When I invited my parents to see it for the first time, I prepared everything meticulously. I thought, maybe this time they'd be proud. They walked in, looked around, then sat on the couch like they were appraising it for resale, not visiting their daughter. My mother glanced at the ceiling and said, "The ceiling's a bit low. Old houses like this tend to leak. Did you check the plumbing?" My father walked through the house, stopping in the kitchen corner. "For the salary you say you're making, I guess this house is acceptable. At least it's an investment for the family's future." I froze. Family? This was my asset. Not a single cent came from them. No loans, no co-signing, no help. Just criticism. I calmly replied, "This is my house. I did it all on my own." My father smirked. "On your own? Don't forget who raised you. Without the family foundation, where do you think you'd be?" I didn't respond. I knew that in their eyes, everything I achieved was the result of what they called their investment. They didn't see the nights I ate instant noodles because I couldn't afford fresh groceries. They didn't see me washing cars on weekends during college or selling my old laptop to pay tuition while waiting for a paycheck. They only see me now, a woman with stable income, a home, and a career to be proud of, and they think it's thanks to their sacrifice. Every time I mention independence, my mother frowns like I just cursed. Once, when I said I was planning to reinvest in real estate, she said, coldly, "Don't think just because you make money, you can do whatever you want. Homes, assets, eventually they should serve the family. Don't forget you're a daughter." I smiled, but it wasn't from joy. It was the kind of smile you wear when you're used to being dismissed. One that hides the sting of being seen not as a person, but as a debt that never finishes being repaid. I started noticing my parents visiting my house more frequently after that day. At first, it was over trivial things. Mom said their basement smelled musty, so she asked to store a few boxes of family documents and keepsakes in my garage. A week later, Dad brought over an old wooden cabinet claiming it was from Grandpa and couldn't survive the damp air at their place. Then came an antique dining table, some embroidered paintings, even a stack of suitcases I was sure no one had used since 2005. At first, I didn't object, thinking they just needed temporary space. But then things got weird. One day I came home from work and found Mom already inside, wiping down my bookshelf like it was hers. When I asked how she got in, she held up the spare keys I had once given her for emergencies and casually said, "This is still family property, sweetie. Did you forget?" I didn't react right away. Maybe I was too stunned, or maybe I just didn't want a scene in the living room I had just cleaned the morning before. But that night I changed all the locks. The following week, my dad called saying he wanted to check the electrical system in my house. I told him everything was fine and had been inspected routinely. But he showed up anyway, brought a voltmeter, and spent nearly an hour examining the circuit breakers like he owned the place. While I was working my office, I heard him call out to Mom, Karen, this panel's gonna need a replacement soon. Call Connor to take a look. Connor, my younger brother, 28, an HVAC tech, was still living in the upstairs bedroom at my parents' house. He had never once paid rent and treated everything as a given right. A few days later, Connor showed up. No notice. He brought a tool bag and walked into my home like he was about to remodel his own place. I stepped out of my online meeting, trying to stay calm. Who invited you here? He smirked. Mom said this place needed urgent repairs. You two got any plans for the living room? If we knock out the wall, it'll open right up. Might even fit a bar in here. I stood frozen. This wasn't interference anymore. This was calculated encroachment. The assertive words, the overreaching actions, everything was pushing me out of my own home. That evening, I called my mother directly. Did you tell Connor anything about fixing up my house? I just said he could take a look, just in case you wanted to expand someday. A house this big, such a waste to live alone in it. I frowned. Mom, this house is mine. I don't need anyone drawing up renovation plans for me. She was silent for a moment, then responded in that soft, patronizing tone. Do you know why you could afford a house? It's because of family foundations, upbringing, sacrifices. I don't want to say it, but Connor needs a stable place too. This house is big. You live alone. What's wrong with sharing? I set the phone down like it had exploded in my hand. After that, the questions started coming fast. Which bank holds your mortgage? Is it a fixed or variable rate? Does your lender offer refinancing? Where do you keep the deed? Wrapped in feigned concern, but I could hear the steel edge in my dad's voice. One day, while working, I got a text from Connor. If you need a property maintenance manager, let me know. I'm available. I didn't respond. The more time passed, the more I felt trapped in what used to be my proudest achievement. I locked my file drawers, reset all my online banking security, and moved the house deed to a secure vault at a local bank. I hid a backup copy in a private safe with a code I had never used anywhere else. The final straw came one night when I returned home late and found a large cardboard box at my door. No label, no name. Inside were old family photo frames, some childhood albums, and a handwritten note from my mom. Peas belong where we all call home, the house that should belong to the whole family. I stood there, staring at photos of myself, a child who once believed that family bonds were unbreakable. I thought I'd been cautious enough, but it turned out this was only the beginning. I hosted a dinner to celebrate my promotion on a Saturday evening in early April, just as spring sunlight began to stretch across the neighborhood. I wanted that moment to be a bridge, to remind my parents and younger brother that even though I'd carved my own path, I still considered them family. I made Dad's favorite grilled beef, tossed a salad with Mom's usual olive oil dressing, and baked a lemon pie from scratch, the kind Connor once devoured half of in one afternoon back in high school. I laid out a new tablecloth, brought out the porcelain dishes I'd kept tucked away, and poured Napa Valley red wine I'd bought on a business trip to San Jose. At 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened the door with a smile, but froze slightly when I saw Connor behind my parents. No heads up, no message. Just a casual remark from my mom as she stepped inside. Your brother was free, so I told him to come along. I nodded, pulled up another chair, and told myself not to ruin the night. During dinner, things stayed civil at first. My mom complimented the new curtains, though her "how much did these cost?" made me pause mid-bite. My dad ate in silence, occasionally glancing around the house like he was taking inventory. Connor stayed glued to his phone, smirking now and then like he was reading something hilarious. I waited until we'd finished eating. Then I brought out the lemon pie and refilled the wine before saying, I have some good news to share. This week, I was officially promoted to Regional Finance Director. There's a raise, and I'll be leading my own team. I smiled gently, trying to stay humble, but still hoping for a flicker of pride in their eyes. Silence. Then my mother spoke, her voice paper thin. So that means you'll be even busier? Aren't you worried about keeping up with the house? My dad set down his wine glass, eyes suddenly cold. Melanie, your mother and I have talked this through. This needs to be said while we're all here. A chill ran down my spine. Say what? He sat up straight, staring directly at me. This house should be a shared family asset. It's not reasonable for you to live alone in a place like this. Connor needs his own space to grow his career, and your mother's getting older. It's no longer convenient for her to deal with the stairs at our place. I sat frozen. What are you talking about? My mother chimed in, her voice trembling, not with emotion, but like she was holding back bitterness. Since you were little, have you ever had anything that wasn't thanks to this family? Your education, your upbringing, your foundation. Now that you've succeeded, it's time to give back. I swallowed the shock and said each word clearly. This is my house. I paid the down payment. My name is on the deed. I make the mortgage payments every month. No one helped me financially or otherwise. Connor scoffed, arms crossed. If no one had taken care of you growing up, you wouldn't even be here. Don't forget your roots, Melanie. Anyone listening would think you made it all on your own. My father leaned forward, voice steely. We've already made the decision. The family will be moving in within the next 2 weeks. Whether you stay or not, that's your choice. But this house will belong to the family. Your mother and I have sacrificed our whole lives. It's time we reap what we've sown. I stood up, voice rough. No, this is my home. No one has the right to take that from me. My mother squinted at me. If you have any conscience left, you won't say no. But if you're choosing to separate yourself from the family, so be it. My dad extended his hand. Give me the keys. I'll hold on to them tonight. I went still. My entire body froze, not from fear, but from disbelief. I looked at each person in that room, the people I called family, but none of them looked back at me like I belonged. They looked at me like a target. I placed the keys on the table without a word, then walked to the door, leaving behind an untouched lemon pie and a dry, bitter silence in the house they had just declared family property. I woke up the next morning on the sofa at my best friend Rachel's apartment. I hadn't gotten much sleep. My parents' words kept echoing like knives stabbing my chest. Hand over the keys. This house belongs to the family. I had handed them over, almost like a reflex. Not out of fear, but because I didn't want to become the one screaming in the kitchen, where I once dreamed of peaceful mornings with coffee and sunlight filtering through the blinds. Rachel had left a note before going to work. Call a lawyer. This isn't a joke. I glanced at my phone screen. 42 unread messages from the extended family group chat, mostly from my Aunt Sylvia, who had always believed a woman shouldn't live alone in a big house. I hadn't opened a single one when the phone rang. An unknown number. I picked up. Hello, this is Thomas Levine from Fairpoint Mortgage. I need to verify some recent changes made to the loan account for Miss Melanie Rhodes. I sat upright, a chill creeping down my spine. What changes? Around 4 p.m. yesterday, someone called to update the primary contact address, submitted a new email and phone number, and also requested to add 2 co-borrowers, one Dennis Rhodes, the other Karen Rhodes. I gripped the phone tighter. Did they say how they're related to me? They stated they're your parents. They provided your full social security number, date of birth, loan ID, even your personal security question. The file nearly went through if the system hadn't flagged it as suspicious. I closed my eyes. 4 p.m. yesterday was exactly when I was in the kitchen, listening to them declare, this house belongs to the family. They have no right to change anything. I am the sole owner, no co-borrowers, and no one is authorized to access my records. Understood. Because the information was so complete, we're required to verify directly. Would you like us to temporarily lock the account? Yes. Lock everything. Enable 2-factor authentication and flag for fraud if anyone else contacts you again. I hung up, my heart pounding. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to make it official, turn me into a stranger on my own financial documents. I drove straight to the bank, requested the full access log, and printed copies of all activity related to the attempted transaction. The staff confirmed the call came from a landline registered under my father's name. I backed up every file onto a USB, then called a real estate attorney named Lindsay Travis, someone Rachel had mentioned before, Thankfully, she agreed to meet that same afternoon. In Lindsay's neat, sunlit office, I laid everything out, from being pressured to hand over the keys to the bank call. She listened intently, taking notes, her expression only changing when I described how my parents used my social security number. Melanie, this is serious identity fraud. They're trying to seize property through impersonation. You have evidence, and we have strong legal grounds, but you need to act immediately. Can you help me? I'll send a cease and desist notice to them today, and we'll begin the process for a temporary restraining order. You should also contact the police, especially if they still have the keys. I nodded. A part of me still didn't want to believe this was real. But every detail, the bank call, my father's ice-cold stare, my mother's sweet but venomous tone, Connor's smug indifference, proved one thing. This wasn't just betrayal. They were stripping me of the life I built with my own two hands. As I stepped out of the law office, the afternoon sun still lingered on the sidewalk, but for me, a different kind of darkness had already begun to descend. I returned to the house on Monday morning, accompanied by a local police officer named Officer Blake. The day before, my attorney, Lindsay Travis, advised me to bring a legal witness if I went back, especially since my parents still had keys. I had filed a police report for unlawful entry and requested a temporary property hold until the dispute was resolved. The patrol car pulled up right by the curb in front of my house, where I used to plant lavender along the walkway. But those purple flowers were gone now. In their place were bags of lime, cement, and a large wooden crate full of construction tools. My heart raced as I spotted my father's gray, beat-up Ford truck parked in the driveway, right next to Connor's pickup. I turned to Officer Blake. They're not supposed to be here. I never gave consent. He nodded firmly. I'll speak to them. Stay in the car until I check things out. I watched him step onto the porch and knock 3 times. No answer. Then the door swung open and it was my father, Dennis Rhodes, standing there in dusty jeans, rolled up sleeves, and holding a hammer. He didn't look surprised. It was like he'd been expecting someone, but not me. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw Officer Blake flash his badge and start taking notes. Then he motioned for me to step out of the car. As Melanie, they're inside the house and claiming this is family property. Clutching the strap of my handbag, I walked through the doorway I had opened thousands of times before. Everything inside looked gutted. My brown leather sofa had been shoved against the opposite wall. The white shag rug I had placed in the center of the room was gone. Paint stains were splattered across the floor. The smell of fresh lumber, paint, and sweat hit me in the face. Connor stepped out from the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, holding a measuring tape, a pencil in his mouth like he was on a job site. He smiled at me as if nothing was wrong. Hey, you're back? I was thinking of knocking down that divider wall. Mom prefers open kitchens. I stood frozen. What did you just say? I'm remodeling the place. The old kitchen tiles were outdated. I found a great supplier. Smoke gray, looks real upscale. My dad walked over, clapped Connor on the shoulder, then turned to me wearing the look of someone making a family announcement. Melanie, this isn't just your decision anymore. This house belongs to the family. Your mother wants the living room turned into an ancestral shrine. Connor will take the upstairs. Your mother and I are moving in next week. I turned to Officer Blake. You see this? They're changing the structure, moving personal belongings, acting like they own the place. But I'm the only name on the deed. Officer Blake took notes seriously. I'll file a report for unauthorized entry and use of property. Do you want them removed today? I nodded. Yes, I want them out immediately. They have no right to be here. My mother came down the stairs, holding an old photo frame of my grandparents. She didn't look at me, just said casually, You're still so stubborn. Family is meant to share, not treat each other like enemies. I replied coldly. No family breaks into someone's house, moves their things, and declares it all theirs like it's normal. Connor tossed the tape measure onto the table. Fine, you want to blow this up? Call your lawyer, call the cops. But you're going to look bad in front of the whole family. Just wait and see. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and started recording every corner. Every paint smear, every missing photo frame, every unauthorized renovation. This would be evidence. I sat in attorney Lindsay Travis's office on Wednesday morning, 2 days after discovering, with the police, that my parents and younger brother had boldly renovated my home as if they owned it. The sun was out, but all I felt was a burning sting on my skin, like standing inside the furnace they built from greed and deceit. Lindsay wore a white blouse, hair pulled back, face calm, but her eyes were sharp as scalpels. Melanie, I'll file for a temporary restraining order within 24 hours. Based on what you've provided, videos, the police statement, and the mortgage documents, the court has grounds for emergency action. But before submitting, I want to review their financial background and legal history. I nodded, gripping my cold paper coffee cup. I suspect they're hiding debt, but I never thought to check. Then let me handle that. With your consent, I'll have my legal team pull credit reports, registered assets, and any public filings related to Mr. Dennis and Mrs. Karen Rhodes. Lindsay stepped out for about 10 minutes. When she returned, she carried a thick, neatly clipped file and placed it in front of me without a word. I could read the disgust in her eyes, not directed at me, but at the names on the report. Our investigation shows your parents are in serious financial trouble, Lindsay began. They owe over $85,000 across 3 credit cards and had accounts temporarily frozen for non-payment 2 years in a row. I held my breath. Last year, they refinanced their current home and took out an additional $60,000 for emergency repairs, but records show the funds were drained within 3 months, with no evidence of renovations or home improvements. She flipped to the next page. More importantly, this isn't their first time engaging in shady financial behavior. Lindsay slid me a copy of a complaint filed in Placer County back in 2016. The filer, Barbara Jennings, my mother's sister. Ms. Barbara accused your parents of attempting to take control of her retirement savings account by forging her signature during a meeting with a financial advisor. The case was withdrawn before going to court due to an internal settlement, but the document is still in the public record. I didn't remember the details. Just that after that year, my mother always referred to Aunt Barbara as a traitor and forbade me from speaking to her. I felt like someone had just pushed me off the 20th floor. Do you want to contact your aunt? Lindsay asked. I nodded. If anyone understands what I'm going through, it's her. That same afternoon, I called Aunt Barbara. She answered after 2 rings, her voice still warm and steady, just like when she used to take me to Disney movies as a kid. Oh my God, how are you? Your mom said you ran off with bad influences, she said bitterly. No, they kicked me out and nearly stole my house. I gave her the short version. Enough to make the situation clear. She paused for a moment, then sighed. They haven't changed. Back then, I nearly lost every cent of my retirement. I only made it because I caught on early and got lucky. Why did you withdraw the case? Because of your grandfather, he begged me. Said, let them make it right. Let's keep the peace. But they never made it right. They just kept going quietly like nothing ever happened. And now, it's your turn. I closed my eyes. All the puzzle pieces snapped into place. My father's icy stare. My mother's shared family speech. Connor's shameless grin. This wasn't impulse. It was calculated, and I was just the next target. I opened my eyes, locking gaze with Lindsay, who waited for my response. Do whatever it takes to protect my property, and if it comes to court, I'm ready. Family is not a license to legalize greed. Lindsay nodded. You just said what many never dare to, and today we'll put that into a lawsuit. I had just finished my Monday morning financial review meeting when I saw my phone vibrating nonstop on the desk. 6 missed calls from Aunt Sylvia, 5 messages from Ellie, my longtime coworker, and an email from HR titled Request for Clarification, Personal Conduct Allegation. I opened the first message from Aunt Sylvia. Melanie, did you really kick your parents out of the house? They're devastated. I can't believe this. My hands turned cold as I scrolled down to a screenshot of a Facebook post from my mother. Karen Rhodes. An old college photo of me, followed by a long, emotional caption. When your daughter becomes successful and forgets who raised her. We gave everything for her, only to be thrown out, just for checking in on the house we helped build. Praying for all parents who still believe in family. The post had over 130 shares. Among them were countless comments from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, my mother's old acquaintances, and distant relatives I barely knew. A daughter like this will die alone one day. No manners, too much education turned her ungrateful. Or Mr. and Mrs. Rhodes raising a snake in their own home. I didn't cry, I just sat frozen, like stone, until a soft knock on the door snapped me out of it. It was Ellie! Melanie, are you okay? What's going on? I tried to keep my voice steady. I just found out too. My family has officially made me the villain of the nation. Ellie looked at me for a moment, then handed me her phone. On the screen was an anonymous email sent to upper management in our finance division. To whom it may concern, I am a family member of Melanie Rhodes. She has been displaying signs of mental instability, dangerous behavior, and has a documented history of severe disputes with her parents over property. I am concerned her position may pose a risk to your clients. Attached was a photo from the dinner night when I was asked to hand over my house keys. Someone had secretly recorded it. The image showed me standing, visibly angry, pointing at my father. There was no audio, but the expression alone was enough to make anyone think I'd lost control. I clenched my teeth, forcing down the lump in my throat. I don't believe a word of that, Ellie said. But someone is targeting you. You need to speak to internal legal immediately. I nodded. Less than an hour later, I was called in to meet with our HR director, Mrs. Margaret Hall, who had always been supportive since my days as an assistant analyst. She began the conversation in a calm but clear tone. Melanie, I need to ask directly. Are the allegations about inappropriate conduct in your family true? I looked her straight in the eye. No, absolutely not. I am the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by my own parents and younger brother who attempted to steal my house and when that failed turned to destroying my reputation. I briefly explained the situation, the restraining order my attorney had filed, and the discovery of their past financial misconduct. Mrs. Hall stayed silent for a moment, then exhaled deeply. I believe you, but you need to take legal action fast. What they're doing could cause real damage if not stopped soon. I left her office with a strange mix of panic, rage, and above all, numbness. Not because of the lies they broadcasted, but because I had once believed my family would protect me when I was hurt. Instead, they were the ones who pushed me off the edge, and then raised a flag declaring me the traitor. In that moment, I knew they didn't just want my house. They wanted to destroy me, piece by piece. The Sacramento County Court read the verdict on a June morning, and the courtroom was so quiet I could hear Attorney Lindsay's pen strike the paper. Based on the evidence presented, including surveillance footage, recorded calls, bank reports, witness testimony, and legal documents, the court issues a permanent restraining order against Mr. Dennis Rhodes, Mrs. Karen Rhodes, and Mr. Connor Rhodes. The judge paused for a second before concluding. Furthermore, the court recognizes the entire property at 1824 Willow Creek Drive as the personal, lawful, and undisputed property of Ms. Melanie Rhodes. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because I had run out of tears long ago. I simply closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and squeezed Lindsay's hand under the table. My father, who sat arms crossed through the whole trial, maintained his icy expression. My mother kept her head low, but I knew it wasn't out of remorse, only shame and defeat. Connor, my younger brother, who once declared he would manage my assets for the good of the family, stormed out midway, ignoring the officer's warnings. I walked out of court feeling like I had just broken chains. No more domineering voice of my father echoing in my head with every decision. No more anonymous threats. No more fake Facebook posts with hundreds of slanderous shares. It was all over. at least on paper. Over the next 3 months, I focused on remodeling the house, not to cover up their traces, but to completely rewrite the space. I hired a design team to tear out the old kitchen cabinets where my mother once arranged flowers like she owned the place. The wood floors were replaced. I even had the wall between the living room and kitchen knocked down, an idea Connor once suggested, with a tone of entitlement, now made real. On my terms. I ordered a new sofa set from a boutique in Portland, olive green, simple, solid. On the walls, 2 abstract paintings. No more family photos, no more curated memories. I didn't deny the past, but I wouldn't let it define me. The backyard, where my father once insisted on building a gazebo for family gatherings, was stripped of its concrete base and turned into a herb and vegetable garden. I installed drip irrigation myself, planted cherry tomatoes, mint, rosemary, and sage. Every morning, I brewed coffee and stepped onto the back porch, listening to the soft drip of water, smelling the moist earth under the early sun. For the first time in years, I didn't feel a weight on my chest when I woke up. Emotionally, I kept seeing my therapist, Anne. Once a week, in a recent session, she asked, "If your parents texted asking to see you again, how would you respond?" I didn't need to think. I wouldn't respond. I have nothing left to say to them. I don't hate them, but I don't forgive them. Not because I lack compassion, but because they've never once apologized. They only sought to reclaim what they believed they were owed. I cut all contact, changed my phone number, blocked their emails, deleted my social media. I don't need to keep tabs on them. I need peace. And I have it by choosing not to look back. I'm no longer Melanie Rhodes, the dutiful daughter trying to prove her worth. I'm Melanie, a 34-year-old woman with a home built by her own hands, a stable career, and a life no one gets to intrude on anymore. I protected the most valuable thing I have, my right to own my life. And to me, that is the brightest victory. Melanie's story is proof that sometimes the greatest threat to the peace we work so hard to build comes from within our own family. In reality, setting boundaries, even with relatives, is not betrayal, but an act of protecting one's worth and dignity. No one has the right to claim the fruits of your labor just because they carry the title of parent or relative. When you stand up for yourself, you're not just preserving your property, you're preserving your right to shape your own life. What do you think about Melanie's journey and her firm choice to cut ties? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more honest, real-life stories about family, boundaries, and self-respect.